My name is Peter Fraser. I was a mathematics teacher at Ankara College from 1962 until 1998. I was recruited by Mr. Browning, who was a famous foreign teacher some years ago in London. After I finished London University with an honours degree in mathematics, physics and geology. And I taught for 1 year in England, and then I decided I would like to go abroad. And the first, advertisement that I saw for jobs abroad was, believe it or not, Ankara College. So I had an interview with Mr. Browning and one of the members of the Vakıf. I think his name was... I had this interview, got accepted, and got in my car and drove to Ankara from where I was in London. And when I first arrived, it was in 1962-63, I was given boys to teach because the school was, if you look down towards the college from Kızılay, the boys were on the left side of the road and the girls were on the right side of the road. And I was put in the boys section. So my first year was teaching lycée and orta boys. Boys gave me a hard time. When, at the end of the year, I can remember the director, the general director was Cezmi Berkin. He's quite a famous in education in Turkey. He was. He decided that it would be better if boys and girls were mixed. So the next year, from 1963, it was mixed classes with orta school on the left and lycée was on the right side of the road, again as you face in the same direction. So I stayed in the same building, which means I was with the orta school. And I stayed there until the end of my time at college, which is a total of 38 years, believe it or not. In 1970, I became the head of department, maths department in orta school, left, and I became the head of department. And one of the things I realized was that we were having a terrible time. All the teachers of mathematics were having a terrible time because they didn't know what to teach. There was a syllabus, a Turkish syllabus, of course, but we were using books from England. And unfortunately, there was a problem about what to teach from the books, where to find it, and it was a bit of a mess. The teachers didn't really know what to teach, and the students didn't know what to study. So I thought it's about time that we did something about it, and I started writing mathematics books. And this was about 1970. I suppose from 1970 up until the time I left, I was writing books. And in the end, I think I finished with 15 books. Not all mathematics. I wrote computer books. And of course, the program changed from classic mathematics to modern mathematics. And so as soon as the program changed, I had to start again and write new books. And as I say, and I also wrote dictionaries for mathematics. And in the end, I finished up with a total of 15 books. I can show you perhaps one, but I'm sure that they are in the school library. Here's one. I think it's Orta 2 from modern. Modern? Or? Yeah, modern. And then the other thing was that in the 1970s, TÜBİTAK started having mathematics competitions. And of course we entered, and we won the first year. And then we found that we won the second year, and the third year, and we won every year. And in the end, TÜBİTAK were fed up with us because all they could do, as I seem to remember the head of the examination part of TÜBİTAK, a man called Galip Bey. He said to me one day, you're preparing your students very well for this exam. All we do now is to try and work out who comes second, because Ankara College always came first. So we did very well. And I got lots of certificates, and our students got lots of certificates from TÜBİTAK in those days. And it went on, I suppose, for about 15 years that we won the competition. And of course, we were giving courses to those students, the best students, and they became very, very good. I'm still in contact with some of them now, and they have very good jobs in whatever profession that they decided to take. And then I went to England for one holiday in 1981, and I was reading an English newspaper, and out of the corner of my eye I saw an advertisement for a computer. And I thought, my goodness me, a computer. And I looked at the size of it, and it was tiny. And it was £50, which is in Turkish lira, it's about 300 lira. I thought, 300 lira for a computer? Wow, I must get one. So I got this computer, and I bought it, and it was called the ZX81, Sinclair ZX81. And I brought it back to Turkey, and I thought, oh, I better teach myself computing. It's the new thing. So I started to learn BASIC, because it couldn't do anything else, this computer. And one day, I was talking to Ismen Bey, who was the Baş Muavin, and I mentioned this to him. He said, what? A computer? He said, right, you're doing a computer course. I said, no, I can't. I don't have a monitor. Actually, it wasn't a monitor in those days. We had to use a television set. So he commandeered a television set from the gymnastics department. Why they had television sets, I don't know. But anyway, he took one old television set from the gymnastics department. I think it was from Orhan Oruç. And I started giving basic programming courses. And believe it or not, it was the very first time in Turkey that anyone had given computer lessons. And so our students were the first students in Turkey to have computer lessons. Now, everything is computers. It's just developed so quickly that, it's just impossible to keep up with it. I certainly can't, not at my age. But that's how it was then. And later, they opened a couple of computer laboratories, and they bought Commodore 64s. But again, all they could do was to program them in BASIC. But several of my students, even now, come to me and say, although nobody ever uses BASIC anymore, at least we learnt what programming was. And a lot of my students have jobs in programming, but of course not in BASIC. But at least it gave them a start. And I also had to write, of course, a computer book in basic programming. I think some of these books are probably still in the library in the school. 1984, I received a telephone call from the British Embassy in Ankara, telling me that the ambassador had recommended me for a medal from the Queen, of all things. I was absolutely shocked at the time. I couldn't understand why, but it seems that the ambassador had found out that all these things and what had happened at Ankara College and the time that I'd spent there. And I wasn't the first one, because John Browning, who interviewed me in London at the beginning, he was given one as well. It's called an MBE, Member of the British Empire. And the college sent me to London to pick up this medal from the Queen. And the Queen of England put the medal on me, and lots of photographs were taken. I came back to Ankara, and they all, of course, all wanted to see the photographs and everything. And it was quite a big thing. I always remember one of my students came up to me afterwards and said, "Sir, do we have to call you sir now?" And I said, "You're already calling me sir." I said, "No, it wasn't as much as a sir. It's quite a bit less than a sir. A sir is a knighthood. It's a bit down the ranking from a knighthood, but it was quite an occurrence in those days, and it allows me to put three more letters behind my name, so I can write MBE. That comes first, and then BSc. In 1998, I left Ankara College. I retired. I'll talk about a bit more about that later. And I was living in my house in London, and one day the telephone rang, and Ismen Çelik, who was he was originally the director of the primary school. He was Başmuavin of the Orta School, director of the primary school. Then he went to the Ankara University School, the new school, as the headmaster, as the director. And he said, "You're coming back to Turkey." I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Yes, you are." And I couldn't really say no to Ismen Bey, because he's the one that started, really, the computer lessons. He got the television set that I used for as a monitor and so on. So I thought, well, okay, I'll come back. So I came back to Turkey, and for 4 years I spent starting up the mathematics department in the building across the road from here, where I am now, at the new Ankara University School. And then I thought, oh, it's about time you retired. So I finished teaching completely. But as you can see, most of my time was in Ankara College. In my time, I taught 1 year only in lycée, and that was when I was with the boys only. That was my first year. But in my time in the Orta School, I had a total of 5 different directors. There was, first of all, Seydi Dinçtürk, who I got on very well with, but he gave me a lot of help because it was my first year. He liked the way I taught, I think. We got on very well together. And then there was Nejat İlhan Leblebicioğlu. You may have heard of him. Wonderful name, wonderful man as well. I always remember when we won this TÜBİTAK competitions, the ceremony was in the playground, and he got up onto the stage with a microphone and shouted into the microphone that "Birinci, ikinci, üçüncü." I'm sure he was trying to tell the whole world. Certainly it must have reached Kızılay from there that we had won this mathematics competition. And this went on for several years. And after Nejat Bey, there was Ismail Dal, who unfortunately passed away recently. But it was fun with him. He was what can I say? We got on very well together, even though my Turkish wasn't very good and his English wasn't very good. I always remember one year England played Turkey at football, and England won 8-0. And it happened twice, actually. And he was a big football fan. And I always remember the next day after the match, Ismail Bey and I always used to get to school early. I think we were the first people in the building. And I waited until 8 o'clock in the morning. And exactly on 8 o'clock, I put my head round his door and I said, "Good night, Ismail Bey. Saat kaçtı? And he said, 8, tam 8. I said, 8:0 mı? And of course he laughed his head off. He knew what I was talking about. But of course, if it had been basketball, it would have been the other way around. So I'm not boasting that England won 8-0. I'm sure they would have lost more than 8-0 if it was something like basketball or volleyball or something like that. But that's how we got on together, and it was great in those days. And after Necdet Bey, there was Nur Sakızlıoğlu, very nice woman, really very nice, very young, but unfortunately she died very young as well. Excellent director. And the last director I had in the auto school was Mary Torun'a, who maybe a lot of you know already. And she tried, I wanted to leave actually a year earlier, but she managed to persuade, I told her, I'm a dinosaur now. I can't keep up with the modern trends. I don't like the modern trends actually in education. I felt that there were, too many young women coming in and telling us what to do when they'd never taught anything in their lives. I said, Mary Hanum, I've really got to leave. I feel now, even though I was still head of department, I feel now that I'm a dinosaur. And she said, no, you're not a dinosaur. And she did her best and managed to persuade me to stay one more year. But as I say, in 1998, I left. I suppose I could have stayed because, as I say, I came back and taught at the university school. Now, I mean, I've talked about what happened basically through the years, directors. I think I should talk about some of my students as well. I now have, believe it or not, well over 2,500 of my old students as Facebook friends. And I know what they're doing now, and we get on very well together on Facebook. They're really, all of them, wonderful, wonderful people who've got excellent jobs, done very well in life. I'd like to tell you about one of my students in particular. You may not have heard of her, but she is in the medical profession. Because in my time, most of the best students became doctors. These days, it's not like that. A lot of them become, something to do with computers, so it could be economists and this kind of thing. Anyway, in those days, most of the very best students became doctors. And her name was Ilgi Öztürk when I taught her. She's now Professor Dr. Ilgi Ertem, and she is the best pediatrician in the country. And I see her from time to time. About a year ago, I became quite ill. I caught pneumonia, zaturae, I think it's called, and I had breathing problem. And we were supposed to meet, and I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And in the end, she said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "I can't breathe." She said, "Right, I'm taking you to Ankara Tip." And she took me to the immunology department to meet with actually 3 of her friends who were all professor doctors, and they were all Ankara College students, and 2 of them were my students. And of course they were quite pleased to see me, and I was very pleased to see them, and they felt maybe that they owed me something, but they certainly fixed me, and I got through pneumonia because of them. But it was wonderful. One day my x-ray was on the lighting board, and I saw 3 professors of that kind of thing, immunology, all looking and studying my inside. I thought, wow, if only the rest of my students could see this. And as I say, they fixed me up. So you know, I'm very, even maybe some of my students are quite thankful to me. I'm very thankful to them as well, because it's payback time, shall we say. Ilgi wrote, is now doing research, and she wrote a very important article, so important in fact that it's published in the Lancet. I don't know if you know, the Lancet is a medical journal, and it has all the latest medical developments. And she wrote in English, in perfect English, the results of a survey that she had done on child development between the ages of 0 and 3. And I thought to myself, wow, this is really something. Especially as she always said to me, I couldn't do this without you. And I said, what? I don't know anything about medicine. She said, but this is statistics. And you first taught me statistics. So I was very pleased to hear that. All the mathematics teachers, there's so many of them that I dare not start giving names. But what they did was wonderful, to teach mathematics in English, as they did in those days. I could never teach mathematics in Turkish, never. But they taught mathematics in English, and I'm very impressed with all of them. It was a wonderful job that they did. Thank you.